Hello again, it's time for more fun with the Woovebox. It's no secret that I've been spending a lot of time with this magical little Australian device lately, so I wanted to dig into one of my favorite new features, audio buffers. If you are new to the Woovebox or to the recent 2.0 firmware, stick around as buffers are a very fun example of what makes the Woovebox so unique and powerful. I'll record whatever I'm saying is Introduced as part of the new DJ effects pages, buffers confused me a bit during beta testing, but now I can't live without them. So I figured a quick tutorial might be helpful to other prospective Wooveboxers out there. They are also a great example of yet another feature that sets the Woovebox apart from even more expensive devices. Let's start with a brief reintroduction to song mode. This won't be a full song mode tutorial, and feel free to skip ahead if you know this stuff already. Each song in the Woovebox can have 16 individual instrument tracks, and each instrument can have 16 patterns of 16 steps. You can see the grid of 16 here, so it makes sense. You can build entire songs by just chaining patterns together and never touching song mode at all. But the real power comes from being able to mix and match patterns in different song fragments, where you can have your kick playing pattern 1, for example, while your bass is playing pattern 3, etc. A song can have up to 99 different fragments, each of different lengths and different parameters, and as of firmware 2.0, there's a flip side to each fragment, which are the DJ effects pages. Just press the value encoder and song while you're in a fragment, and it will switch to the DJ page for that particular fragment. Here, you can do things like fade in some noise for a build-up, or do filter sweeps and bring in a drone note under your track, but you can also take advantage of two audio buffers, each capable of recording and playing back up to 11.8 seconds of audio. Worth noting here that these 11.8 second recordings do not count toward the available sample time on the device, which is 2 minutes and 4 seconds, if I recall, divided between two banks. As the point of the buffers is that they will continually be overwritten and not saved anywhere. There are workarounds though, so more on that later. This allows you to manipulate fragments in unique, non-destructive ways, as well as free up CPU by not actually playing any patterns. More on that later as well. As an example, I've got a simple sketch of a song set up here, just using a kick, snare, and bass. So fragment 1 is set to play for 1 bar, and we've got our 3 individual tracks ready to go there. You just press right and choose the tracks you'd like to have in a given fragment. We're not going to do any fancy pattern stuff here, as this is all about buffers. Okay, so we've got our fragment 1 playing our kick, snare, and bass like this. Nothing fancy, but maybe a fun little groove. And then let's create a second fragment by scrolling over. Now we'll give it a length by pressing right and scrolling the encoder here. Let's set that to 1 bar as well. But we're going to leave it empty. You'll see why soon. Back to fragment 1, we'll press value and song to switch to its DJ page. You see the screen now says DJ01. Each of these lit pads now represent a parameter we can alter during the course of this fragment, like the amount of noise or filter sweep or drone, like I mentioned before, etc. We're going to focus on the bottom row today, which includes buffer length, buffer play mode, and buffer record mode. Using these 3 options, we can select which buffer we want to record, along with what audio source we are recording, how long we want the recording to be, and which buffer we want to play back, as well as if it's played back forward, in reverse, or alternating between both. As an example, I've set buffer record mode to synth 1, meaning it will record our synth sounds we just played back into buffer 1, but crucially, it also needs to know how long you'd like to record for, or else it won't do anything because there's no length set. So to do that, we have to set a buffer length with the buffer length parameter here, and I've set that to 16 steps, which is the full bar for fragment 1 here. Now we'll play our fragment. Notice once it got to fragment 2, it stopped playing. That's because we never told it to play buffer 1 anywhere yet. Technically, if I had set the buffer length in fragment 1 to shorter than fragment 1 itself, it would have started playing before that fragment ended, but that might have sounded confusing before we know what buffers are really doing, so I kept it simple for now. Let's go back to fragment 2. Here, our buffer play mode defaults to forward 1, which is fine for now, but we have to set a buffer length again, or else it won't play anything. It doesn't know how long we want to play for. Let's set to 16 again for now. Back to fragment 1, play again. Now, notice fragment 2 had no tracks set to play, but it still played our pattern and actually would again right now. That's because it's playing the buffer we recorded in fragment 1. So technically it sounds the exact same, but it's just pulling from that buffer. So from here, we can do things like change the buffer length or playback mode and manipulate that audio. So let's drop the buffer length to 8 steps, so half of what we had before, and change the play mode to Pong 1, which will ping pong between reverse and forward. We don't even have to go back to fragment 1 this time, as the buffer has already been recorded. So there you go. It went forward and reverse, and that's just playing from the buffer non-destructively, nothing related to our patterns that we also have saved in our pattern modes. And this audio will now persist until we do any other recording to buffer 1, which will then overwrite it. Of course, we can also mix and match our buffers and pattern playback, which is what I'm doing in this third fragment, where I have our 3 individual tracks set to play their patterns as normal. But on the DJ page for fragment 3, I've set our buffer length to only 2 steps and reverse, so it's a bit of a glitchy vibe underneath our pattern groove. Let's hear how that sounds. Now, if I wanted, I could record that into buffer 2 for use later. In this case, I can set record mode of fragment 3 to mix 2, which will grab everything, including the glitchy playback of buffer 1, into buffer 2. Now, in a fourth fragment, set it to 1 bar like the others. I can set that to play, let's say, forward 2, and we'll have to give it a length. Now, we've only got a length of 2 steps being recorded in fragment 3, so that's all that's going to be able to be played back in fragment 4 in terms of what's in buffer 2. But let's hear how that sounds. So you can hear already some potential for interesting breaks and kind of build-ups, etc. And we have barely done anything with actual instrument tracks or patterns. I'll play back the 4 fragments we've got so far so you can hear what I mean. I have noticed the occasional audible clicking depending on what I'm doing with the buffers, especially if I'm being extra glitchy, but that can usually be mitigated by changing things like the playback mode or involving some of the other DJ effects. Some quick notes now that we've got a basic example out of the way. You can only play back a single buffer per fragment. Similarly, you can only record to a single buffer per fragment, but they can each be different. Like in fragment 3, where we were playing back buffer 1 while recording to buffer 2. You can also use some overdub recording modes that I didn't get into to overdub onto an existing buffer, but you can also completely overwrite an existing buffer with a new recording if you want. And you may have noticed there's only 1 buffer length parameter, and that applies to both playback and recording. For example, in our fragment 3, we had buffer length set to 2 steps, and we were playing back buffer 1 in reverse for that glitchy kind of groove underneath our overall patterns. But we were also recording to buffer 2, and because our length was set to 2 steps for playback, it also would mean we were only recording 2 steps into buffer 2. So that pattern, or that buffer length parameter, affects both playback and recording. In this case, if I had wanted to record a longer audio clip into buffer 2, I could have done something where maybe I created another fragment with a bit of a longer buffer length and recorded to buffer 2 there to use later. But here I just wanted to go for a quick glitchy example. You'll have to experiment a little bit to get the hang of this. But that's not to say we're done with buffers, because there's a lot more I could talk about, but one thing I really do want to touch on is that things really get interesting when using the line in as part of your buffer recordings. For example, I've got my mic that I'm talking through now going into the Woovebox input. So we're back on fragment 1. Let's change buffer recording mode to line in 1, which will record whatever's coming into the Woovebox into buffer 1. Now when I press play, it will record whatever I'm saying and start playing back in fragment 2. It will record whatever I'm saying. Yes. So you can hear it took the settings that we had prior from our old example and mangled that new vocal audio through them, which is a lot of fun. Now you'll notice, of course, that our previous buffer 1 recording is now gone. It was overwritten by my voice. That's all part of the fun. Buffers are temporary snapshots that can give life and texture to your overall song. Now imagine using that same workflow to capture an external instrument, kind of like a live looper that you can then mangle and mix into your Woovebox composition. Of course, you can still get that same recording back that we had in buffer 1. Just set record mode back to synth 1 and play pattern, or it's fragment 1 again. There we go. We're back to what we had before. Because the buffer is constantly running, it's just looking for you to send it something to record. There's also a lot more you can do with buffers in conjunction with things like DJ effects, but I'll have to save that for another video as there's still more to look at today. Case in point, let's say you really like a buffer recording and don't want to let it get overwritten because you'd like to use it later. Don't forget, the 2.0 firmware also introduced skip-back resampling, which means the Woovebox is always listening to your last 11.8 seconds, and you can dump that into a sample slice for later. Press value and sampler to enter sampler mode. I've got an empty kit here. I'll use the context menu, press right and the value encoder, page through until I get to skip back. Hold it. It'll tell me to wait, record, done. There we go. So that just dumped the last 11.8 seconds of playback into a sample slice for me to trim, adjust, and save however I want for later. Just remember that this method will use up some of the overall sample device time, so keep that in mind. Okay, back to buffers for a final tip for now. One thing I've really enjoyed doing is switching back and forth between fragments quickly and causing chaos by glitching out the buffers. Basically, you can override the buffer length by scrolling away too quickly, meaning it can only catch a snippet. For example, I've got fragment 1 set to record to buffer 1 at 16 steps, but if I scroll too fast to fragment 2, it will still play back whatever it had time to record, meaning I can go back and forth getting different results and doing weird builds or glitches live. Let's try it. Some pretty fun potential live implications here. I know Woovebox has a live mode, but there are no buffers or DJ effects there, so I've been spending more time in song mode. Okay, let's stop there for now. So much more we could do with buffers, but take a minute to digest the basics and let me know what you think in the comments. To recap, go to the DJ effects page for a particular fragment, set the buffer length and record mode, and then you can play back that audio all over your song fragments however you want, not to mention overdub or overwrite it as you wish. Have you been using buffers, or can you think of another device with a similar workflow? Lots more to come with the Woovebox, so let me know if there's something specific you'd like to see covered, and do me a favor to like this video if you made it this far.